Commander Zix-Tar stood on the bridge of his warship, looking out at the stars. His massive frame cast a shadow across the metal floor. Like all HFY, he was built for war. His body was covered in thick, natural armor that could stop most weapons. Sharp claws extended from his hands, and his jaw held rows of deadly teeth. He was 3 meters tall and weighed as much as a small vehicle. The HFY Empire had ruled the galaxy for 1,000 years. They had conquered 47 star systems without ever losing a single war. Other alien races either joined them willingly or were destroyed completely. There was no middle ground with the HFY. Zix-Tar had never known defeat. He had been born in a military breeding facility, trained from birth to be the perfect warrior. Fear was not something he understood. Pain was temporary. Death was for the weak. These were the truths that every HFY learned before they could even speak properly. His ship, the Iron Fang, was one of hundreds in the HFY fleet. Each vessel was a masterpiece of destruction. Their weapons could crack planets in half. Their shields could withstand the blast of a star. Their engines could cross the galaxy in days. No other species had technology that came close to matching theirs. "Commander," called his second-in-command, Sub-Commander Kralith. "We have reached the edge of the target system." Zix-Tar turned his attention to the main display screen. The system before them was called Kepler 442 by its inhabitants. It contained 6 planets, 3 of which showed signs of life. According to their scouts, a new species had recently established colonies here. This species called themselves humans. The intelligence reports on humans made Zix-Tar almost laugh. They were small, soft creatures with no natural weapons. Their skin was thin and easily damaged. They had no claws, no armor, no enhanced strength. They lived for less than 100 years, which was barely enough time to become properly trained in warfare. Their technology was primitive compared to HFY standards. "Show me the detailed scans of the primary colony world," Zix-Tar ordered. The screen changed to show a blue and green planet. The humans had named it New Geneva. The planet held about 2 million human colonists, scattered across several settlements. Their largest city had barely 500,000 inhabitants. "Their defensive capabilities?" Zix-Tar asked. "Minimal," Kralith replied. "They have some orbital platforms with basic energy weapons. Their ground forces appear to use projectile weapons and simple explosives. No plasma technology, no particle beams, no force shields." Zix-Tar studied the data with growing disappointment. He had hoped for at least some challenge. The HFY military machine needed regular combat to stay sharp. Fighting such weak opponents would barely count as training exercise. Their fleet strength? 12 ships total in the entire system. Most appear to be converted cargo vessels with minimal weapons attached. Their largest warship is smaller than our scout vessels. This was even worse than Zix-Tar had expected. He had seen stronger resistance from space pirates. At least pirates usually had the sense to run when faced with superior force. According to the reports, humans seemed to have no concept of tactical retreat. The High Command had assigned this mission to Zix-Tar as what they called a cleanup operation. It was meant to take 3 days at most. Day 1. Arrive and demand surrender. Day 2. Demonstrate superior firepower. Day 3. Accept surrender or complete extermination. Then they could move on to more important conquests. "Sir," another officer called from the communications station. "We are receiving a transmission from the human colony." "Already?" Zix-Tar was surprised. Most species waited until they were actually attacked before attempting communication. "Put it on screen." The display showed a small, elderly human female. She appeared to be in her 70s, with gray hair and wrinkled skin. By HFY standards, she looked incredibly fragile. A strong wind could probably knock her over. "This is Director Sarah Chen of the New Geneva Colony Authority," the human said. Her voice was calm and steady. "We have detected your fleet approaching our system. We hope this encounter can be resolved peacefully. We have no quarrel with the HFY Empire and see no reason why our peoples cannot coexist." Zix-Tar almost laughed out loud. This tiny creature was trying to negotiate with the most powerful military force in the galaxy. It was like a small insect trying to bargain with a hurricane. "I am Commander Zixtar of the HFY Imperial Fleet," he replied. "You have exactly 1 hour to evacuate all human presence from this system. Any ships or personnel remaining after that time will be destroyed." This is not a negotiation. The human woman listened to his words without showing any fear. This surprised Zixtar slightly. Most species showed obvious terror when faced with a HFY ultimatum. Some leaders had been known to faint on the spot. "I understand your position, Commander," Director Chen said. "However, we cannot abandon our homes and the lives we have built here. We respectfully decline your demand. If you choose to attack us, we will defend ourselves." The transmission ended. Zixtar stared at the blank screen in confusion. He had delivered thousands of ultimatums during his career. The responses usually fell into 2 categories: immediate surrender or desperate attempts to negotiate for more time. He had never encountered simple refusal before. "Sir," Kralith said quietly, "should we proceed with the attack as scheduled?" Zixtar nodded slowly. Clearly, these humans did not understand what they were facing. Perhaps they needed a demonstration of HFY power before they would see reason. He would start with their orbital defenses. Once those were destroyed, the humans would surely reconsider their position. "Signal the fleet," he commanded. "Begin the assault. Target their defensive platforms first. Try not to damage their cities too badly. We may need some of their infrastructure intact." As his ships moved into attack position, Zixtar felt a slight sense of disappointment. He had hoped for at least a few hours of interesting combat. Instead, this would be over before the day was finished. The humans would surrender after their first taste of real warfare, and his fleet would move on to find a more worthy opponent. He had no way of knowing that he was about to learn what terror felt like for the first time in his life. The first HFY attack began exactly 1 hour after the ultimatum expired. Zixtar watched from his command chair as his fleet moved into position around New Geneva. 12 HFY destroyers against the humans' pathetic orbital defenses. It should have been over in minutes. The human orbital platforms were simple structures, basically metal frameworks holding weapons and sensors. They looked like construction equipment that someone had tried to turn into military hardware. Zixtar counted 8 platforms in total, each one smaller than a HFY fighter craft. "Begin bombardment," he ordered. The Iron Fang fired its main weapons. Streams of superheated plasma shot across space toward the nearest human platform. The energy beams struck their target dead center. When the light faded, Zixtar expected to see empty space where the platform had been. Instead, the platform was still there. Damaged, yes, but still functional. Its weapons were already turning toward the Iron Fang. "Impossible," muttered Kralith. "Those platforms should have been vaporized." The human platform fired back, but instead of energy weapons, it launched what appeared to be chunks of metal. Zixtar almost laughed. Primitive kinetic weapons against HFY shields. It was like throwing rocks at a mountain. The metal chunks hit his ship's shields and bounced off harmlessly. But then more platforms opened fire. And more. Soon the space around the HFY fleet was filled with flying metal projectiles. The weapons were crude, but there were many of them. "Sir," the weapons officer reported, "the projectiles are not penetrating our shields, but they are draining power faster than expected." Zixtar frowned. "How is that possible?" "The humans appear to be using high-density materials, depleted uranium, tungsten cores, some kind of compressed alloy. Each projectile carries much more kinetic energy than our sensors initially calculated. This was unusual, but hardly threatening. Increase power to shields, and continue the attack." The battle continued for 20 minutes longer than Zixtar had planned. The human platforms proved surprisingly difficult to destroy completely. Even when their main structures were damaged, pieces would break off and continue fighting independently. Some platforms split apart into smaller units that scattered in different directions, making them harder targets. When the orbital defenses were finally eliminated, Zixtar felt relieved. Now the real battle could begin. He ordered his ships to attack the human settlements on the planet's surface. But as his fleet descended toward New Geneva, more surprises awaited them. The humans had turned their entire planet into a defensive position. Mining equipment had been converted into weapons. Cargo ships were being used as kamikaze bombers. Even civilian vehicles were firing improvised missiles. "Commander," the sensor officer called out, "we are detecting movement in the asteroid belt. Multiple contacts approaching fast." Zixtar looked at the tactical display. Dozens of objects were moving toward his fleet from the direction of the system's asteroid mining operations. They appeared to be modified cargo haulers, but they were accelerating much faster than any cargo ship should be able to manage. "Those ships should not be capable of such speed," Kralith observed. The lead human ship suddenly exploded in a brilliant flash of light. Then another. And another. Zixtar realized with shock that the humans were deliberately destroying their own vessels to create debris fields that would interfere with his targeting systems. "They are sacrificing their ships to blind our sensors," he said in disbelief. But that was not the end of the human strategy. As the debris spread, more ships emerged from behind it. These vessels fired another volley of kinetic projectiles, then immediately changed course and retreated before the HFY could return fire effectively. The humans were fighting like no enemy Zixtar had ever encountered. They did not try to match his superior firepower directly. Instead, they used hit-and-run tactics, environmental advantages, and what could only be described as creative desperation. After 4 hours of combat, Zixtar's fleet had destroyed perhaps half of the human defensive positions. But they had not yet achieved a decisive victory. Worse, his own ships were starting to show signs of wear from the constant barrage of kinetic weapons and surprise attacks. "Sir," the communications officer announced, "we are receiving another transmission from the planet." Director Chen appeared on screen again. She looked tired, but unbroken. Behind her, Zixtar could see smoke and damage from the ongoing battle. "Commander Zixtar," she said, "I wanted to thank you." Zixtar was too surprised to respond immediately. "Thank him? For attacking their world? You have given us exactly what we needed," Chen continued. "For years, our colony has been divided by politics and disagreements. Some people wanted to focus on farming. Others wanted to build industries. Some thought we should explore space more aggressively. We could never agree on anything important." She smiled slightly, and Zixtar noticed that her eyes held no fear, only determination. "But now we all agree on something. We agree that we will not surrender our freedom to you or anyone else. You have united us in a way that years of peace never could. So thank you for that gift." The transmission ended. Zixtar stared at the blank screen, feeling an emotion he could not identify. In his experience, defeated enemies begged for mercy or screamed threats. They did not thank their attackers. "Resume the bombardment," he ordered, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. The next 6 hours of fighting were unlike anything in HFY military history. The humans seemed to have endless reserves of improvised weapons and unexpected tactics. When their military bases were destroyed, civilian settlements continued fighting. When their ships were eliminated, ground forces kept resisting. Most disturbing of all, the humans showed no signs of breaking. Other species usually began surrendering once their casualties reached 10%. The humans had lost at least 30% of their defensive capability, but their remaining forces fought even harder than before. As the first day of what should have been a 3-day operation came to an end, Zixtar found himself facing an uncomfortable reality. The humans were not going to surrender quickly. They might not surrender at all. For the first time in his military career, he began to wonder if he had underestimated his enemy. The thought was deeply unsettling. The HFY did not make mistakes in warfare. They certainly did not struggle against primitive species with inferior technology. Yet here he was, still fighting a battle that should have ended hours ago against creatures that should have given up before it even began. Something was very wrong with his understanding of these humans. And Zixtar was beginning to suspect that the wrongness went much deeper than simple tactical miscalculation. 3 weeks had passed since the battle began. 3 weeks. Zixtar stared at the tactical display. trying to understand how this had happened. The cleanup operation was supposed to take 3 days. Instead, his fleet was still fighting for control of a single human colony world. The humans had lost most of their major settlements. Their orbital defenses were gone. Their fleet had been completely destroyed. By every military standard Zixtar knew, the battle should have been over. The humans should have surrendered by now. But they had not surrendered. They had not even asked for terms. Instead, they kept fighting. When their military bases were destroyed, civilians picked up weapons and continued the resistance. When their factories were bombed, they built new weapons in caves and underground tunnels. When their communication centers were eliminated, they used simple radio transmitters to coordinate attacks. Worse, the humans seemed to be getting better at fighting, not worse. Their tactics became more creative each day. They used the planet's geography against the HFY forces. They turned destroyed buildings into traps. They even used the weather to their advantage, timing attacks during storms when HFY sensors were partially blocked. "Sir," Kralith reported, "we have located a significant group of human defenders. They are holed up in Mining Complex 7. Intelligence suggests this may be one of their last major strongholds." Zixtar studied the location on his tactical screen. Mining Complex 7 was built into the side of a mountain, with only a few entrances. If the humans were trapped there, this could finally be the decisive battle he needed. "How many defenders?" he asked. "Approximately 200 humans, sir. Mix of military personnel and civilians." Zixtar made his decision. "Prepare a ground assault. I want this ended today." 2 hours later, Zixtar led his warriors down to the planet's surface. He had decided to observe the final battle personally. After 3 weeks of frustrating warfare, he wanted to see these stubborn humans face defeat with his own eyes. The mining complex was carved into solid rock, with heavy metal doors blocking the main entrances. HFY heavy weapons made short work of the barriers. Within minutes, his forces were advancing through the tunnels. The humans had set up defensive positions throughout the complex. They fought from behind improvised barricades made of mining equipment and metal plates. Their weapons were still primitive by HFY standards, but they used them with skill that impressed even Zixtar. As his warriors advanced deeper into the complex, they encountered smaller and smaller groups of defenders. The humans were clearly running out of soldiers. This would be over soon. Finally, they reached the main mining chamber. It was a huge underground cavern, filled with abandoned equipment. At the far end, perhaps 50 humans had made their final stand. Zixtar studied the group through his battlefield scope. What he saw confused him. Yes, there were human soldiers among the defenders. But there were also people who were clearly not military. He could see miners still wearing their work clothes, engineers with tool belts, even some who appeared to be teachers or medical workers. Most shocking of all, there were children. Not many, but several young humans who could not have been more than 15 years old. They carried weapons that were too big for their small frames, but they held them with steady hands. "These are not soldiers," Zixtar said to Kralith. "No, sir. Sensor scans indicate that most of these humans are civilians, non-combatants." This made no sense to Zixtar. In HFY society, warriors fought and civilians were protected. The idea of children and workers standing alongside trained soldiers in battle was alien to him. "Demand their surrender," he ordered. The transmission went out across the cavern. "Human defenders, you are surrounded and outgunned. Surrender now, and your lives will be spared." The response came from a young human woman who appeared to be a school teacher. "We appreciate the offer, Commander, but we must decline. We have decided that some things are more important than staying alive." Zixtar felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard defiant words before, but there was something different about the way this human spoke. She was not angry or desperate. She was calm, almost peaceful, as if she had already made peace with whatever was about to happen. "Final warning," Zixtar broadcast. "Surrender or be destroyed." "We understand," came the reply. "We are ready." Zixtar gave the order to attack. What happened next would haunt him for the rest of his life. The humans did not retreat. They did not try to flee. They did not even take cover properly. Instead, they advanced toward the HFY positions with a determination that defied all logic. A human child, barely old enough to hold a weapon, charged directly at a HFY warrior 3 times his size. The boy was cut down instantly, but his attack distracted the warrior long enough for an adult human to strike from another angle. An elderly human woman, wounded and bleeding, crawled across the floor to reach a fallen weapon. She used her last breath to fire one final shot before dying. A group of human miners, armed with nothing but their digging tools, threw themselves at a HFY squad. They knew they could not win, but they fought anyway, buying precious seconds for others to advance. But it was not just their willingness to die that terrified Zixtar. It was the look in their eyes. Every human he saw had the same expression. They were not afraid. They were not angry. They were simply, absolutely, completely determined to continue fighting no matter what happened to them. These humans had made a choice. They had decided that death was preferable to surrender. Not just the soldiers, all of them. The teachers, the workers, the children. They had all made the same impossible choice. For the first time in his life, Zixtar felt genuine terror. Not fear of death. He had always been ready to die in battle. This was something much worse. This was fear of an enemy that could not be defeated, because they had already accepted the ultimate sacrifice. The battle lasted only minutes. When it was over, all 50 humans were dead. Not a single one had tried to surrender. Not a single one had tried to run. Zixtar stood among the bodies, feeling something he had never experienced before. The HFY had won the battle, but somehow, it felt like a defeat. These humans had chosen their deaths, and in doing so, they had stolen victory from their conquerors. "Sir," Kralith said quietly, "we should return to the ship. There are reports of new human activity in other sectors." Zixtar nodded, but he could not stop looking at the fallen humans. Warriors he could understand. Soldiers died for their cause all the time, but these people, these teachers and workers and children, had died for something he could not comprehend. They had died for an idea. And ideas, Zixtar was beginning to realize, might be the most dangerous weapons in the universe. The news of the prolonged battle spread through the HFY fleet like a disease. Warriors who had never questioned their superiority began to whisper in the corridors. A minor cleanup operation had become a month-long siege. The humans were still fighting. Zixtar received daily reports that made less sense each time he read them. Human civilians were volunteering for suicide missions. Children were building bombs in their schools. Elderly humans were sabotaging supply lines, despite knowing they would be caught and killed. "This is not normal warfare," Kralith observed during their morning briefing. "These humans fight like they welcome death." "No," Zixtar corrected him. "They fight like they have found something worth dying for." The difference was important, though Zixtar was still trying to understand what that something might be. He had ordered his intelligence officers to study human communications, hoping to find some explanation for their inexplicable behavior. What they found was even more disturbing than the battle reports. "Sir," Intelligence Officer Vexnal reported, "we have intercepted and translated several thousand human transmissions from across the planet. The content is unusual." "Show me," Zixtar ordered. The main screen displayed a series of human messages. They were not military communications or desperate pleas for help. Instead, they appeared to be personal letters between family members and friends. One message read, "Dear Mom, the HFY destroyed our settlement yesterday, but we rebuilt it in the caves. Remember what you taught me about standing up to bullies? This is just a bigger bully. Love, Jenny." Another said, "Tom, they killed half our people, but the rest of us are still here, still free, still human. That has to count for something. See you on the other side, brother." Zixtar read message after message. None of them contained battle plans or military intelligence. Instead, they were filled with concepts that made no sense to him. Honor, dignity, freedom. Independence. The right to exist without permission from others. These are not tactical communications, he said slowly. No, sir, Vexnal agreed. They appear to be philosophical discussions. The humans spend considerable time talking about abstract ideas rather than practical survival strategies. This was completely alien to Kethai thinking. When the Kethai fought, they fought for territory, resources, or dominance. Practical goals with measurable outcomes. The idea of fighting for concepts that could not be touched or weighed was incomprehensible. But it got worse. Zixtar learned that New Geneva was not even an important human world. It was a small agricultural colony with minimal strategic value. The main human civilization lay elsewhere, in systems the Kethai had not yet reached. Sir, the communications officer interrupted his thoughts. We are receiving a transmission from the Kethai High Command. Admiral Thexmore appeared on the screen, his scarred face showing obvious displeasure. Commander Zixtar, explain why your simple cleanup operation has lasted 5 weeks. The humans are more resilient than expected, sir. Resilient? The Admiral's voice rose dangerously. They are primitives with inferior technology. How many humans can possibly remain? Approximately 400,000 on New Geneva alone, sir. But that is not the primary concern. Admiral Thexmore's eyes narrowed. Explain. Zixtar chose his words carefully. The humans are not fighting like any enemy we have previously encountered. They appear to be motivated by factors beyond simple survival. Our victory over this world will not end their resistance. Of course it will. Dead enemies do not resist. Sir, with respect, we have intercepted communications from other human worlds. They are mobilizing their entire species in response to our attack on New Geneva. We estimate that dozens of human worlds are converting to military production. The Admiral was silent for a long moment. How many worlds do the humans control? 10. Intelligence suggests approximately 300 inhabited systems, sir. Zixtar watched his superior's expression change from anger to concern to something approaching alarm. 300 worlds was not a massive empire by galactic standards, but it was much larger than the single small colony they had expected to find. What is their total population? The Admiral asked quietly. Conservative estimates suggest 50 billion humans across all their worlds, sir. The silence that followed was the longest of Zixtar's career. 50 billion individuals, all apparently willing to fight with the same fanatical determination they had witnessed on New Geneva. Sir, Zixtar continued, there is another concern. Our attack on the humans has been noticed by other species. Some are beginning to question Kethai invincibility. This was perhaps the most dangerous development of all. The Kethai Empire depended on fear and respect to maintain control over their subject species. If other races began to believe that the Kethai could be resisted, the entire imperial structure might collapse. Admiral Thexmore seemed to age before Zixtar's eyes. What are your recommendations, Commander? Zixtar had been dreading this question. Sir, I believe we have made a strategic error. We attacked the humans' bodies, but we have awakened something much more dangerous. We have awakened their spirit. Explain what you mean by spirit. The humans fight for ideas, sir. They believe that some concepts are worth any sacrifice. Freedom, independence, dignity. These are not physical things that can be destroyed with weapons. They exist in the humans' minds, and minds are much harder to conquer than bodies. The Admiral stared at him for a long moment. Are you suggesting that the Kethai Empire cannot defeat a species of primitives? I am suggesting that we have not been fighting primitives, sir. We have been fighting an idea that thinks it is worth dying for. And ideas are the most dangerous enemies in the universe. Zixtar paused, then delivered the words he had hoped never to say. I recommend immediate withdrawal from all human systems and a permanent non-aggression treaty. Admiral Thexmore's face showed shock, then anger, then something that might have been fear. You are recommending that the Kethai Empire retreat? I am recommending that we avoid a war we cannot win, sir. The transmission ended abruptly. Zixtar knew that his career was probably over. No Kethai commander had ever recommended retreat from inferior opponents. But he also knew that he was right. The humans had shown them something terrifying. They had proven that physical superiority meant nothing against an enemy that refused to be conquered. An enemy that chose death over surrender. An enemy that fought not for victory, but for the right to remain free. As he looked out at the stars, Zixtar realized that the HFY Empire had made the worst possible mistake. They had not started a war with humanity. They had awakened something that would never sleep again, and that something was spreading. Other species throughout the galaxy were watching the human resistance. They were learning that the mighty HFY could be fought, could be hurt, could be held at bay by creatures they had dismissed as weak. The age of easy HFY conquest was over. They had met their match in a species that became most dangerous when it had nothing left to lose. 2 days after his conversation with Admiral Thexmore, Zixtar made a decision that would have been unthinkable 6 weeks earlier. He requested a meeting with Director Sarah Chen. The request itself was unprecedented. HFY commanders did not negotiate with defeated enemies, but Zixtar no longer saw the humans as defeated. Despite losing most of their settlements and military forces, they continued to fight with undiminished determination. If anything, their resistance had grown stronger. The meeting took place in the ruins of New Geneva's government building. Zixtar insisted on meeting in person, though his bodyguards advised against it. He needed to understand these humans face to face. Director Chen arrived precisely on time, walking through the rubble-filled streets without escort. At 73 years old, she had somehow survived 6 weeks of warfare that had claimed younger and stronger people. Her clothes were dirty and torn, but she carried herself with dignity that impressed even Zixtar. They met in what had once been a conference room. The walls were cracked from explosions, and half the ceiling was missing, but Chen sat down calmly as if they were discussing routine business. "Commander Zixtar," she said simply. "Thank you for coming." Zixtar studied her carefully. After weeks of trying to understand human psychology, he still found them completely alien. This woman had watched her world burn, had lost friends and family members, had seen her life's work destroyed. Yet she showed no hatred, no despair, no desire for revenge. "I need to understand," Zixtar said bluntly. "My people have conquered 47 civilizations. All of them eventually surrendered when faced with inevitable defeat. Why do your people continue fighting?" Chen smiled slightly. "May I tell you a story from our history?" Zixtar nodded, though he wondered what ancient events could explain the present situation. "Several hundred years ago," Chen began, "humans fought a war among themselves. One group tried to enslave another group based on the color of their skin. The enslaved people had no weapons, no armies, no technology. By any logical measure, they should have accepted their situation." She paused to look out through the broken window at the damaged city beyond, but they did not accept it. They escaped when they could. They resisted when they could not escape. They died rather than submit. Not because they thought they could win, but because they knew that some things are worth any price. "Slavery is a practical matter," Zixtar said, trying to understand. "The strong dominate the weak. This is the natural order." "Is it?" Chen asked gently. "Tell me, Commander, what do you fight for?" The question surprised Zixtar. Territory, resources, the glory of the HFY Empire, all practical things. Tangible benefits. Chen nodded thoughtfully. "We fight for different reasons. We fight for the right to make our own choices, the right to live according to our own values, the right to raise our children in freedom." "These are just words," Zixtar protested. "Abstract concepts. To you, perhaps. To us, they are everything that makes life worth living." Chen stood and walked to the broken window. "You see our destroyed city and think we have been defeated. We see proof that we chose to fight, rather than surrender our humanity. Which of us is correct?" Zixtar had no answer for that question. In 6 weeks of warfare, he had learned that human logic was fundamentally different from HFY thinking. They valued things that could not be measured or weighed. "Your fleet will leave our system," Chen said. It was not a question. "Yes," Zixtar admitted. "The High Command has ordered a tactical withdrawal, and you will not return?" Zixtar hesitated. The truth was more complex than a simple yes or no. We have learned that conquering humanity would be more difficult than anticipated. Chen turned back to face him. You have learned that we cannot be conquered at all. Not because we are stronger than you, but because we refuse to accept conquest. She was right, and Zixtar knew it. The HFY could destroy human worlds, could kill human populations, could eliminate human technology. But they could not force humans to submit. And without submission, there could be no conquest. You have awakened something in my people, Chen continued. For years, humans have been scattered across hundreds of worlds, focused on our own local concerns. We rarely acted together as a species, but you have given us a common enemy and a common cause. The implications hit Zixtar like a physical blow. The HFY attack had not defeated humanity. It had unified them. 50 billion humans across 300 worlds were now focused on a single goal, ensuring that no one could ever force them to surrender their freedom. We will defend ourselves if you attack us again, Chen said calmly. But we will also do more than that. We will help other species resist you. We will share our technology, our tactics, our determination. You have shown the galaxy that the mighty HFY can be fought. This was Zixtar's worst fear realized. The humans would not be content to simply survive. They would actively work to undermine HFY power throughout the galaxy. Why are you telling me this? He asked. Because I want you to understand what you have created, Chen replied. You came here expecting to find weak creatures who would submit to superior force. Instead, you have discovered that some things cannot be conquered by force alone. She walked back to her chair and sat down. You have learned what every tyrant eventually learns. You can rule bodies, but you cannot rule spirits, and humans will always choose death before spiritual defeat. Zixtar stood to leave, but Chen's next words stopped him. We do not hate you, Commander. We understand that you are doing what your nature tells you to do. But we are also doing what our nature tells us to do. And our nature says that freedom is not negotiable. Our nature percent. 2 hours later, Zixtar was back on his ship, preparing for departure. He had one final duty to perform. He opened a communication channel to HFY High Command. Admiral Thexmore appeared on screen, his expression expectant. Report, Commander. Sir, I recommend that all HFY forces withdraw from human space immediately. I further recommend that we establish a permanent non-aggression treaty with humanity. On what grounds? Zixtar took a deep breath. Sir, we have encountered something unprecedented. We have met a species that cannot be defeated because they refuse to acknowledge defeat. They would rather die than surrender. And they view death in battle as victory. He paused, knowing that his next words would end his career. Sir, we attacked their bodies and awakened their souls. We have created an enemy that will never stop hunting us. I recommend that we leave them alone, and hope they choose to leave us alone in return. The transmission ended in silence. Zixtar knew he would face court-martial for his recommendations, but he also knew he was right. As the HFY fleet departed from human space, Zixtar watched New Geneva shrink in the distance. The humans were already rebuilding, already preparing for the next challenge. They had learned that they could resist the most powerful empire in the galaxy, and they would never forget that lesson. For the first time in his life, Zixtar understood what terror truly meant. Not fear of death, but fear of an enemy that became stronger with each defeat, more dangerous with each loss, more determined with each setback. The HFY had ruled through fear for 1,000 years. Now they had created something that did not know how to be afraid. The age of easy conquest was over. The age of resistance had begun.